There are wars history remembers, and then there are losses it quietly files away. Not with explosions, not with screams, but with silence. This is not the story of a city destroyed or a people marched out at gunpoint. This is the story of people who disappeared while still standing exactly where they were. In the age of modern states, power discovered something more effective than force, something quieter, more efficient, more permanent. Paper, forms, registers, categories, a name written slightly differently, a birth certificate altered, a census entry revised, a language reclassified as dialect, a community reassigned to a new administrative zone overnight without consultation. And just like that, a people became administratively invisible. They still woke up in the same houses, still worked the same land, still buried their dead in the same soil, still whispered prayers in the same tongue before sleep. But on official records, they no longer existed. Their village was renamed after a distant bureaucrat or a forgotten general, their language labeled local, regional, or worse, unofficial. Their identity reduced to a checkbox that no longer fit, a form that offered no space for who they truly were. They were not expelled, they were corrected. Children were taught new histories in school, histories where their grandparents never appeared, where their ancestors' names were absent from textbooks, their contributions uncredited, their struggles unrecorded. Old stories were called myths. Old songs were filed under folklore, interesting but irrelevant. Old names were mispronounced by teachers, clerks, officials, until families began shortening them, changing them just to avoid the daily humiliation of being misunderstood. Not banned, just discouraged. The past didn't vanish overnight. It faded, like ink in rain. Cemeteries became abandoned, though someone still tended the graves. Churches became unused structures, though candles flickered inside on holy nights. Homes became state property, though families lived in them for generations, now tenants in their own inheritance. And when questions were asked by a curious student, a visiting journalist, or a distant relative, the answers were always calm, measured, bureaucratic. There was nothing here before. You're mistaken. That community never existed. Those records must be inaccurate. Perhaps you're confusing it with another place. The lie worked because it was quiet, because it came wrapped in paperwork, not violence, because it sounded reasonable, even helpful. Generations passed. New maps were printed, clean, precise, authoritative. Old borders erased with a stroke of a pen. New identities normalized through ID cards, school curricula, national holidays. And the absence became ordinary, not tragic, not controversial, just normal. Like a photograph left too long in the sun, colors bleaching, edges curling, until you can no longer tell who's in it. But memory does not obey paperwork. It survives in accents, in the way a grandmother says bread with a soft lilt that doesn't match the national language, in recipes with no official origin, passed hand to hand, never written down because writing invites scrutiny, in surnames that don't quite match the language they're written in, hyphenated, misspelled, anglicized, but still carrying the echo of a lost homeland. It survives in family stories told softly, as if volume itself were dangerous, stories told only after dark, only when the children are half asleep, only in the kitchen, far from open windows. One document survives in an archive, tucked between unrelated files, mislabeled, overlooked. One photograph without a label, a group of people in front of a stone house, faces solemn, clothes worn but clean. No date, no names, Just eyes that seemed to say, "We were here." One song with no country willing to claim it, sung at weddings, hummed while washing dishes, its melody older than any flag. And slowly, very slowly, the outline of what was erased begins to reappear. Not loudly, not violently, but persistently. Because erasure is never complete. It only works as long as no one looks too closely. And today, people are looking again. At records, cross-referencing birth certificates with land deeds, comparing old maps with satellite images, searching digitized archives for a single mention of a forgotten name. At maps, not just the ones printed by governments, but the ones drawn by elders on napkins, the ones etched into memory. Turn left at the crooked oak, then past the well that dried up in '52. At the silences between the lines, in official reports, in school books, in census data, the gaps speak louder than the words. This is not the story of people who lost a war. Wars leave ruins. Ruins attract attention. Ruins become monuments. This is the story of people who lost their place in the story itself, whose existence was edited out, not with fire, but with a red pen, not with exile, but with omission. History's greatest illusion is not destruction. Destruction leaves evidence. The true illusion is convincing the world that nothing was ever there, that the land was empty, that the language had no speakers, that the culture had no roots. But the earth remembers. The rivers remember. The wind carries fragments of songs across borders that didn't used to exist. And now a new generation is listening. They are learning the old words, not from textbooks, but from great aunts who still remember how to curse in the mother tongue. They are tracing genealogies through church registries, migration records, even shipping manifests. They are filing freedom of information requests, demanding access to sealed archives, reclaiming names that were changed without consent. They are not asking for revenge. They are asking for acknowledgement, for the simple truth: we were here. And in that act of remembrance, in the quiet insistence on being seen, they undo the silence. Not at once, not with fanfare, but with persistence. Because erasure is never complete if even one person remembers their name. At first, the return came as a murmur, a question in a library where no one expects an answer. A grandmother's slip of the tongue during a national holiday broadcast, a word in the old language, fleeting, unexplained. A child's homework that doesn't match the official timeline. A silence that is no longer comfortable, but charged. The state, of course, did not act with malice, or at least not with the malice of fire and sword. It acted with the cold logic of tidiness. A nation, it believed, is a story, and every story needs a single narrator. Multiple voices create dissonance. Dissonance creates instability. And so the editors were called in. Not soldiers with rifles, but archivists with stamps. Not generals with maps, but clerks with ledgers. Their weapon, consensus. Their method, categorization. Their victory, a clean, uniform record. But what they called tidying up, the people called unstitching. For the people were not just entries in a ledger, they were the ledger itself, written not in ink, but in the grain of wood in their homes, in the path of water through their fields, in the lines on their elders' faces. You cannot unwrite a story that is written in the land. So the resistance began where true resistance must, in the body. It began with a woman who refused to shorten her son's name on the school register, even when the teacher sighed with impatience. It began with a man who, when asked for his native language on a form, wrote the old name in clear block letters and left the field blank when the system rejected it. A historian who, instead of looking for kings and battles in the archives, looked for grocery lists, marriage bans, and land disputes between neighbors, the fragile paper trail of daily life.
The state had erased them from the narrative, so they became archaeologists of their own absence. They learned to read the negative space. The blank spot on the map wasn't empty, it was a shape. The missing word in the song wasn't a gap, it was a silence with a specific echo. The renamed river still flowed the same path, it just answered to a stranger. And in that answering lay the first crack. A poet wrote a verse using the old village name as a refrain. A baker secretly shaped a loaf into a symbol that hadn't been seen in public for decades. A group of teenagers, bored in a history class, started a digital archive on a server in another country, uploading faded photos, recording elders' voices, and mapping forgotten places onto modern satellite views.
This was not rebellion with banners. It was represence, a stubborn, quiet insistence on taking up space in records, in conversations, in the imagination. The state's bureaucracy, designed for efficiency, had no protocol for this. You cannot send a form to silence a melody hummed in a kitchen. You cannot issue a decree against the scent of a particular herb growing in a backyard garden, a herb used in a non-existent ceremony. You cannot arrest a story that has no single teller, but 1,000 mouths whispering it in the dark. The return did not come as a revolution with a triumphant date. It came as a slow dawn. One morning, a tour guide in the capital city, deviating from the official script, would point to a nondescript square and say, "My great-grandmother sold wildflowers here." In her language, this place was called "Where the Two Winds Meet." The tourists would nod, snap a photo, and move on, but the sentence would hang in the air. It would enter the world as a fact. A few years later, a linguist would publish a paper not on the dominant language, but on the regional dialect, tracing its grammar to an ancient literary tradition. She would call it a language. An official would dismiss it, but the word would now exist in academic databases. A film student would make a short, quiet film about the abandoned cemetery. He would film the hands of the old woman who still weeded the graves, though she called no name aloud. The film would win a prize in a festival overseas. The local news would report it as a local interest story, but the image of those hands in the soil would not fade. Piece by piece, document by document, memory by memory, the erased outline would be redrawn, not as a bold, defiant line, but as a delicate, persistent tracing, like fog condensing on glass, revealing the ghost of what lies beneath. The final, most powerful illusion of power is the illusion of permanence. It wants its edits to be seen as eternal, its maps to be seen as reality, its story to be seen as the only story. But people are not paper. They cannot be filed away forever. They are living, breathing archives. Their blood is a registry. Their breath is a document. Their very existence is a record that cannot be shredded. And so the story continues, not with an ending, but with a return to the beginning, the truth that was always there, waiting in the silences, in the gaps, in the stubborn, unkillable memory of the land and its people. The world is not just beginning to hear it, it is beginning to remember.